Heidi-ho, Coder Rangers. That was terrible. I'm never doing that again. I need to not watch Tim the Toolman Taylor before I record these intros. It's just bad. First of all, the workman comp for that show, the workman comp, the insurance, must be out of control. It's constantly blowing things up. Poor Al. I mean, Al's got a harassment lawsuit. Basically, it's a slam dunk, right? I just don't even know what to say. It's just a really weird 90s sitcom. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today, we're here to talk about Tabnine with Eran, founder over there. This is a pretty interesting product because, I'm all about the enterprise these days. And it's basically, I don't want to put words in his mouth because it's an interesting perspective, but it's basically enterprise-friendly coding assistance, right? So AI for coding, specifically meant to address the concerns of the enterprise, tying into your JetBrains, your VS Codes, all that good stuff. I know you may be like, well, why can't I use Copilot? Well, the idea is you may have security concerns, you may have compliance concerns. Also, they have kind of a ton of bells and whistles. So pretty interesting, relatively, I'd say, unique approach to a problem that lots of people are trying to solve. But I think they've definitely hit on a vector that, frankly, is being overlooked. But before we get into that, other news, just a PSA. If you are running Minio, they are no longer going to be forward maintaining Minio open source. I'll put a link in the show notes. Take a look at Seaweed FS. There's other alternatives too, like Garage. But yeah, that's a big deal. If you're running the paid Minio, you're okay. But if you're running the open source one, you have a little bit of a problem. So, or you will, right? It's not like they're not like ripping down the GitHub repo, but it's not going to get continued support. Getting back to compliance issues, if you're required to show that you're using actively maintained packages, that will probably be a problem for you in a few months. So just a heads up. As always, check out the Discord and enjoy the show. All right, folks, we have a great guest today. I think this is our first professor to ever be on the show. Eran's here. He's also the founder at Tabnine. It's true you are a professor, right?
Yeah, it's true. Truth in advertising. Absolutely, yeah.
I love it. So tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Tabnine.
Sure. So I'm Eran. I'm a co-founder, CTO of Tabnine. Other than that, as you mentioned, professor of CS at Technion, which is a leading Israeli university. Been doing machine learning for software engineering for a long time, since before it was cool. Really started by looking at classical problem of program synthesis. How do we turn high-level specifications into programs in a way that you can verify the results? So actually very far from the vibe coding vibe of these days.
Wow, that's so interesting. So when you say focused on the enterprise, what specifically makes Tabnine more enterprise focused than, say, like a Microsoft Copilot or GitHub Copilot?
Yeah, so in Tabnine, we are really focusing solely on the enterprise, and we provide what we call org-native agents, meaning agents that know the organization really well, that are native to the organization. They know the organization like your senior engineer. And the second aspect of the enterprise thing is providing the enterprise with full control on what these agents are doing, what they're allowed to do, and the quality of the code that they generate. Again, right, as we delegate more and more things to agents, as we give them more autonomy, we also need to give humans more oversight to control what is the work that is getting done, what is the quality of the result.
Interesting. So are they running this in their normal editors? So let's say they're using VS Code or they're using IntelliJ or RubyMine. Is it plugged into all of those?
Yeah, part of being enterprise first means that you meet the enterprise where they work, right? So it means that you run in all IDEs, you connect to all source control management systems, you connect to all document management systems, right? So you meet the users where they work. So that includes all the IDEs that you mentioned and then some.
Okay. Wow. So how, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. How am I making sure that my security model, right? Because the enterprises I'm thinking of are like in regulated industries, could be medical, could be, I work a lot with aviation. And as you would imagine, they have tons of rules, right? Medical alone has all that HIPAA compliance stuff that can be a nightmare here in the States. How are you ensuring that those policies are not being violated by the tool?
Yeah, right. So HIPAA policies, it's a whole thing in and of its own. I don't think that it's something just for the Tabnine agents. There's probably much more that goes beyond that on the processes, etc. I'm just like, I don't know. I am guessing. But as far as the code goes, you can definitely define rules for Tabnine in natural language, and Tabnine compiles them down to agentic flows that check those rules with very low false positive rates, right? So there are two kind of challenges here. One is, how do you define the rules? And for that, in Tabnine, we use natural language, so something anyone can understand, anyone can formulate the rules. Provide additionally, sorry for diving in technical bit, you provide some positive and negative examples, which are optional together with the rule. And that allows Tabnine to generalize from that and create an agentic flow that verifies these rules in a way that is not annoying, in a way that has a false positive rate that is acceptable and low for users. So again, I'm not familiar enough with HIPAA rules to say what exactly is, amenable to automatic checking with sufficient precision, right. But you get the gist of the tech stack, and that can provide a very strong support for many rules that are at the level of the user understanding of the code or the user semantics, and not necessarily, don't have a nested loop of step 3, right? So we're not interested in like the tiny linter style rules, which are also useful, but more in rules that are relevant to your specific code base, to your specific use cases, etc.
So when you say a positive and a negative example, can you give me, I'm overusing the word example here, but example of those kind of examples?
Yeah, I can give you, when I'm saying examples, I typically mean pieces of code or like some pieces of the relevant components that are used correctly or used incorrectly. And that is just to augment the natural language description, something that is more rooted in the actual entities of the code base. Otherwise, there are many ways to translate the high-level natural language rule to realize that in the code base, and that may be too vague to lend itself to a high precision check.
Okay, so am I off base? I do a lot of Ruby development, and Ruby has the concept of monkey patching, which is, in my opinion, very terrible. So could I have a rule that basically gives you an example of what some of the worst type of monkey patching looks like? It says, "Thou shalt not use monkey patching."
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good example. I think that's closer in spirit to linter rules because it is not specific to your code base, right? It's specific to Ruby programming. But you can also say something like, hey, never access our database directly, only access it through the database wrapper layer, which is like this thing, right? And
okay. So you could be more abstract than, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's like further away from linter and more to kind of your code base, your kind of architectural decisions that are not uniform across the industry, right? I think I will not get into like the debate about monkey patching, but assume for a second it's not specific to your problem. It's something like a best practice across industry.
Right. But we may have something, let's say like a user's credential manager, right? And we say maybe we have a specific way we want that accessed because there's some validations. We say you must only access these credentials via that, this method, this construct we've put up. Yeah.
Yeah, or get employee details only through this microservice and not through the other 17 copies of other services that we have lying out there that nobody knows exactly what they're doing. So we're talking enterprise setting.
Right. We're never, ever touching that one legacy service that's been running for 10 years and the guy's dead who wrote it. Because we're all afraid if we break it, we can't host a seance and ask good old Bill what he meant when he wrote this. So
exactly right. And so these rules are kind of like from the heads of the experts to the fingertips of everyone in the organization, right? So it's enforced both in the IDE and then in the CI. So you have much more control on kind of what the agents are doing, because agents are more prone to make these kind of like uninformed decisions as they're just looking through the code base, right? So we need to also communicate those best practices of the organization to agents, especially as we delegate more and more work to them.
So that's interesting then, because it not just for enterprise style security. I would think as like a manager or a senior developer or team lead, I could use these rules as a way to, I mean, it's not nice to say, but let's say it nicely, put guardrails around my junior developers, right? To make sure that they're not doing anything wacky.
Yeah, and I think they would appreciate that as well if it's surfaced in the IDE, because then they don't get slapped in code review, right?
Code review is always, you know what? Save everybody a little bit of heartache at the end of the week. I think I can say
exactly.
So now we were saying the enterprise, we're using that term pretty vaguely. What does your ideal customer look like? I know you have customers. So what is, who is taking
hundreds of enterprises. This, I think traditionally the ideal customer is an enterprise that has a relatively complicated code base, that has legacy, talking like millions of lines of code somewhere out there, tens of millions of lines of code, maybe regulated, maybe also kind of concerned about the quality of the code and is being held to standards either of compliance or otherwise doing some sensitive kind of work, right? Something that is pretty far away from vibe coding. Think, I don't know, automotive, aerospace, medical, insurance, finance, fraud detection, these kind of things that you don't really vibe code your way through and hope that it kind of works, but you need like stronger assurance, and also where the balance between reading code and writing code is very different than greenfield, right? We're talking brownfield development, right?
Right. And critical systems that must work, right? And must adhere to these standards.
Yeah, they not necessarily all of them are critical, but I think all of them are complex enough that if you don't know what you're doing, it's going to end up badly.
Okay. Wow. So I was looking at it myself at Tabnine, and it seems it's relatively plug and play, right? Like, for instance, I like to work half the time in JetBrains, sometimes in VS Code. And it looks like I would just go ahead and install the plugin, sign up, and I'm ready to go. I don't really need to change my workflow too much.
Yeah, you don't. For an enterprise, there's like a server-side component to it that has to be deployed in the enterprise, which then connects to all these sources of information like the code base, like the Jira and the Confluence, the rule base that we just talked about, which is configurable, etc. And kind of correlates and aggregates information across these systems in order to provide agents with the organizational knowledge, right? So that's the grounding of the agent in the organization is done via a server-side component. So it is plug and play, but you need to plug it into the information sources to get the value out of it. And that's typically the only configuration you need, right? It's like authentication against the various systems in the organization, and then wait a bit for Tabnine to crunch through and create its own internal representation on the server side. And then you're off to the races, right? So that's really easy. I think an important aspect of that is that the server-side component can be deployed anywhere. It can be deployed on SaaS, it can be deployed on your private cloud, and can even be deployed in air-gapped configurations, right? We have customers that are air-gapped and they kind of deploy this completely on their own hardware.
Interesting. So I have a couple questions then. So let's take the easy one. So you're saying it can take a look at things like Jira. What is it? Is it looking for sprints for individual tickets or something else?
It is looking for correlations between code and tickets, between different tickets. It's trying to really add more color to what it is learning from the code alone, because often the code itself does not reflect the discussion or the original intent that hopefully is expressed somewhere in Jira/Confluence land, external to code itself. Sometimes it's other sources of documentation. Sometimes it can be support tickets, right? So the idea is that, we believe conceptually that in order to be successful, the AI engineer needs the same visibility as the human engineer, right? So if you to handle some feature, to write a feature or to fix a bug or something, would typically look at Jira and Confluence and maybe support ticket. We believe that Tabnine needs to do the same in order to be as successful in the long run.
That makes a ton of sense. Right. And I'm assuming the more data it has, right, the more documentation, the more rules, the more Jira tickets, the more it will understand, as you said, the context and not just the rote code that was written.
Yeah, exactly. So again, this is not a greenfield vibe coding use case. This is like very much you need to know what you're doing. This is like the reason that onboarding a new developer in our customers, if you take a developer off the street, typically it takes them a few months before they're productive in these complicated systems. And the idea of the agents is also to operate in a much more informed way from day one. They onboard Tabnine, get agents that are just much more aware of the organization.
That makes a ton of sense to me. All right. Well, we always wrap with one question. It's kind of fun. So, it should be easy. Take it, relax. What is one tool you can't live without? Now, the only restriction is it can't be a tool that you make, right? So it can't be Tabnine.
So the only tool I can not live without that is not Tabnine. Probably Notability, which is my note-taking application on the iPad. And I should mention another tool, which is Sublime. And Sublime is really, these two are where I manage the rest of my life other than Tabnine is Sublime and Notability. So shout out to these two great tools.
What is Sublime? You don't mean Sublime Text, right?
Sublime Text, yeah, Sublime Text. Absolutely. That's like my that's my
the
favorite
successor.
editor. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the successor to the venerable TextMate 2 from back in the day.
Yeah, of course.
You gotta love it. All right, well, Eran, it's been awesome having you, and yeah, folks, check out Tabnine. I know a lot of you are with me in the brown world of the enterprise, so no greenfields here.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.